The conference room felt smaller than usual, like the walls were pressing in from all sides. Sean Pierce stood at the front, his voice steady and confident as he delivered his presentation to our director. I sat 3 chairs down, watching him click through slides that looked strangely familiar because I'd created most of them. And that's why, unfortunately, we can't trust Adam to lead client accounts anymore, Sean said, his eyes never meeting mine. The data inconsistencies in his last report suggest either negligence or deliberate manipulation. Either way, we can't risk another delay with CenturyTech. My stomach dropped. The entire project team sat around the table, their eyes flickering between Sean and me. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Sean was my best friend. I'd gotten him this job. I'd trained him. I'd vouched for him when nobody else would. Our director, Malcolm Hayes, exhaled sharply and turned toward me. His expression was hard, disappointed, like I'd personally betrayed him. Adam, I think you need to pack up your desk. We'll discuss severance details with HR this afternoon. The words hit me like physical blows. My hands trembled under the table. My throat went dry. Around me, people avoided eye contact, suddenly fascinated by their notebooks or phones. And Sean just stood there, presenting my work, destroying my career with lies I couldn't immediately disprove. Security appeared at my cubicle within minutes. A young guard I'd seen 100 times but never spoken to stood there awkwardly while I gathered my belongings into a cardboard box someone had thoughtfully provided. Personal items. A coffee mug my daughter had given me. A photo of my family. 11 years compressed into one small box. Through the glass partition, I could see Sean settling into the team lead chair. My chair. The one I'd occupied for the past 3 years. He was already typing on the computer, probably changing passwords, claiming territory that had been mine just 20 minutes ago. I walked past his desk on my way out. He didn't look up, but I stopped anyway. You knew this wasn't true. For the first time that morning, he met my eyes. His expression was blank, almost bored. It's not personal, man. It's business. Business. The word felt like acid. This was the same man who'd cried on my couch 6 weeks ago when he couldn't afford his rent after his divorce. The same person I'd called my brother for 15 years. Behind me, I could hear applause coming from the conference room. They thought Sean had saved the project from my incompetence. They had no idea what he'd actually done. I walked out of Vectra Systems carrying my box and what remained of my dignity. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time, staring at the termination letter Malcolm had handed me on my way out. The words blurred together as my mind raced through everything that had just happened. How had I not seen this coming? How had I been so blind? Then something clicked in my memory. A detail I'd almost forgotten in the chaos of the morning. The CenturyTech contract, the massive deal that represented 60% of Vectra's annual revenue, was still registered under my personal consulting license. I'd structured it that way years ago for liability reasons, and I'd never bothered to transfer it because it had never mattered before. The contract renewal was coming up. In exactly 30 days. And Sean had no idea that legally, CenturyTech wasn't Vectra's client. They were mine. My hands stopped shaking. A strange calm settled over me as I started my car and drove home. Sean thought he'd won. He thought he'd successfully taken my position, my projects, my reputation. He'd stood in that conference room and destroyed me with lies, confident that nobody would question him. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd assumed I was powerless. He'd assumed the damage was permanent and complete. He was wrong about that. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. My name is Adam Wintrow. I'm 44 years old, and until that morning, I'd been a senior project manager at Vectra Systems for 11 years. I'd built my career there from the ground up, developing client relationships and managing complex technical implementations that kept the company profitable. Sean Pierce had been my best friend since college. We'd met in an engineering class our sophomore year and had been inseparable ever since. He was the best man at my wedding. I was there when his marriage fell apart. We'd been through everything together, or so I thought. 2 months ago, Sean called me in desperation. His divorce had destroyed him financially. He'd lost his job at a startup that went under, burned through his savings on legal fees, and was facing eviction from his apartment. He sounded broken, defeated, asking if I knew anyone who was hiring. I did better than that. I personally recommended him to Malcolm for an open position on my team. I talked up his skills, his work ethic, his potential. I told Malcolm that Sean was someone we could build around, someone who'd bring fresh energy to the department. "Your family," I told Sean when I called with the good news. "We'll figure this out together." He started at Vectra a week later. Everyone loved him immediately. He was charming, enthusiastic, always agreeing with management's ideas. I was proud of him. I thought I was watching my friend rebuild his life. The first few weeks seemed perfect. Sean dove into the work, asking thoughtful questions and staying late to learn our systems. He'd stop by my desk with coffee in the morning, thanking me again for the opportunity I'd given him. But small things started to shift in ways I didn't immediately recognize as problems. Emails I'd sent to clients suddenly had Sean's name in the CC line when I'd only sent them to the client directly. Project updates I'd written were being forwarded by Sean with minor edits that somehow made them look like his original work. In team meetings, he'd reference conversations I'd had with clients as if he'd been the one having them. When I'd gently correct him, "Actually, that was the meeting I had with them last Tuesday," he'd laugh it off. "Oh right, sorry man. We're working so closely together, I'm getting our conversations mixed up." I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe it, because the alternative was too painful. This was my best friend. The man I'd saved from unemployment. Surely he wasn't deliberately taking credit for my work. Malcolm started noticing Sean more. He'd praise his initiative, his communication skills, his leadership potential. Each compliment felt like a small theft, because the work being praised was usually mine, just filtered through Sean's increasingly confident presentations. I told myself I didn't mind. Success for the team meant success for all of us, right? That's what I kept repeating to myself, even as doubt began creeping in. The turning point came during a presentation to our biggest client, CenturyTech. I'd spent weeks preparing the quarterly review, analyzing their systems, developing recommendations for improvements. Sean had sat in on some of the preparation meetings, taking notes, asking questions. The morning of the presentation, Sean asked if he could help present, since he'd been working closely on the project. I agreed, thinking it would be good for him to get face time with a major client. We'd split the presentation 50-50. Except that's not what happened. Sean opened with my introduction, using my exact phrasing. Then he moved through my analysis, quoting my findings word for word. When we reached the recommendation section, the part one was supposed to present, he smoothly transitioned into it without pausing, never giving me the chance to speak. The client's CEO, a woman named Patricia Kane, nodded approvingly throughout. This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need. Sean, you've really grasped the complexity of our systems. I sat there stunned, my prepared notes useless in my hands. Sean glanced at me once, a quick look that might have been apologetic or might have been something else entirely. After the meeting, Malcolm pulled Sean aside. I heard him say, "You've got real leadership potential. Keep this up, and we'll be talking about advancement opportunities." Sean grinned, accepting the praise. He didn't mention that he'd presented my work. He didn't suggest I deserved any credit. He just soaked it all in like he'd earned it. That evening, my colleague Jenna found me still at my desk long after everyone else had left. She was one of the few people at Vectra who'd been there longer than me, someone I trusted and respected. "Adam, we need to talk," she said, closing my office door. "Have you noticed what Sean's been doing?" I looked up from my computer. "What do you mean?" "He's been meeting with Malcolm without you. Private meetings, usually after hours. And I've seen him presenting your project files as his own contributions. I think he's positioning himself to take over your role." The accusation stung, partly because I'd been trying so hard not to see it. Sean wouldn't do that. He's my friend. I got him this job. Jenna looked at me with something like pity. "Adam, that's exactly why he would do it. You gave him access to everything, your contacts, your projects, your reputation. Now he's using all of it to replace you." "You're wrong," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "We're a team. He's just enthusiastic." "Then ask him about the meetings with Malcolm," Jenna suggested. "Ask him why your project documentation is showing up in his personnel file as examples of his work. Ask him why clients are starting to think he's the lead on accounts you've managed for years." After she left, I sat in the dark, staring at my computer screen. I pulled up the shared drive and started looking through recent file activity. What I found made my stomach turn. Sean had been copying my project files, renaming them, and storing them in his own folders. Client notes I'd written. Budget analyses I'd developed. Strategy documents I'd created. All of it duplicated and rebranded. I confronted Sean the next morning. Not aggressively, but as a friend seeking clarification. We met in the break room before most people arrived, and I asked him directly about the copied files. "Oh, those?" He poured himself coffee, completely relaxed. "Malcolm asked me to familiarize myself with all our active projects. I'm just building my own reference library. But some of these files have been edited to remove my name from the author field." Sean shrugged. "Must be a system glitch. You know how temperamental the shared drive can be. And the client meetings? Patricia Kane from CenturyTech thinks you're the primary contact now." "Come on, man," Sean said, his tone turning slightly defensive. "We work together. Does it really matter who gets the individual credit? The team succeeds together." That phrase again. Team success. As if credit didn't matter, as if recognition was petty. But I noticed he only said that when he was taking credit for my work. When Malcolm praised him individually, he never suggested sharing that recognition with the team. "The CenturyTech contract is important to me," I said carefully. "I've been managing that relationship for 3 years. I'd appreciate you making it clear to them that I'm still the primary contact." Sean looked at me for a long moment, and something flickered across his face. Calculation. Assessment. Then his expression shifted back to friendly concern. "Of course, brother. I didn't mean to step on your toes. We're good, right?" I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. "Yeah, we're good." But we weren't good. Not even close. Over the next 2 weeks, I found myself systematically excluded from my own projects. Team meetings about CenturyTech would be scheduled without me. When I'd ask about them, Sean would apologize. "Oh man, I thought you were on that invite. Must have been an oversight." My project updates started going missing. I'd submit them through our system, and they'd vanish. When Malcolm asked why I wasn't keeping him informed, I'd explain that I'd submitted everything on time. He'd check his records and find nothing, then look at me skeptically. "Adam, I need you to be more organized," he'd say. "We can't have communication breakdowns on accounts this size." Meanwhile, Sean's updates always came through perfectly. He'd send recap emails after every meeting, copying Malcolm and the entire leadership team. His communications were polished, professional, making him look indispensable while I appeared incompetent and disconnected. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of submitted reports before they disappeared. Email receipts proving I'd sent communications that supposedly never arrived. But presenting this evidence would make me look paranoid, like I was attacking the person I'd personally vouched for. Sean had positioned himself perfectly. If I accused him of sabotage, I'd look like a bitter colleague unable to share the spotlight. If I stayed silent, he'd continue eroding my position until there was nothing left. I was trapped, and he knew it. Late one Friday night, I was the last person in the office. Or so I thought. I'd stayed to catch up on work that seemed to multiply no matter how many hours I put in. On my way to the printer, I passed Sean's desk and noticed his computer was still on, displaying an open document. I shouldn't have looked. I knew it was wrong. But something made me stop and read what was on his screen. It was my complete project documentation for SentryTech. Not a copy, my actual master files, including internal budget models, client communication strategies, and technical specifications I'd developed over 3 years. All of it was open on his screen, and he'd been reformatting it, removing my name and replacing it with his own. There were notes in the margins in his handwriting: present this to Malcolm as personal initiative. Use for promotion discussion. Position as independent achievement. I stood there staring at undeniable proof of what I'd been trying not to see. This wasn't misunderstanding or miscommunication. This was deliberate, calculated theft. Sean was systematically claiming my work, building his reputation on my accomplishments, and planning to use it all for his own career advancement. My hands shook as I took photos of his screen with my phone. Then I quietly went back to my desk and started thinking about what I needed to do next. I didn't confront Sean about what I'd seen. Instead, I started preparing. Over the weekend, I reviewed every file, every contract, every agreement related to my projects. That's when I rediscovered something crucial I'd almost forgotten. The SentryTech contract was structured under my personal consulting license. Years ago, when I'd first started working with them, I'd been an independent contractor before joining Vectra full-time. When Vectra hired me, we'd agreed to keep the SentryTech relationship under my license for liability reasons. Technically, I was subcontracting my services to Vectra for that specific client. I'd never bothered to restructure the agreement because it had never mattered. The arrangement was convenient for everyone, and I was loyal to Vectra. But it meant that legally, SentryTech wasn't Vectra's client, they were mine. The contract came up for renewal in 30 days. And according to the terms I'd negotiated, only I could authorize that renewal. Not Vectra. Not Malcolm. Not Sean. Just me. I pulled out the original signed documents and read them carefully. Every clause confirmed what I remembered. The client relationship belonged to me. I'd been providing it to Vectra as a courtesy, but I could terminate that arrangement at any time with proper notice. A plan started forming in my mind. Not revenge exactly. Just consequences. Natural, inevitable consequences for someone who'd betrayed trust and stolen work. I wasn't going to fight Sean directly. I was going to let him think he'd won, right up until the moment everything collapsed. The morning Sean got me fired, I almost saw it coming. Almost. He'd been building towards something, I just hadn't realized how bold he'd be. Malcolm called the emergency meeting, and I assumed it was about the SentryTech project timeline. Instead, I walked into a trap. Sean had prepared a presentation alleging data manipulation in my quarterly report, claims that were complete fabrications but impossible to disprove without access to files that had mysteriously disappeared from my computer. He stood there, confident and authoritative, explaining how he discovered discrepancies that suggested either gross negligence or deliberate fraud. He had charts. He had examples. He had a narrative that made me look either incompetent or criminal. Malcolm didn't even give me a chance to respond before making his decision. The evidence looked damning, and Sean had crafted it perfectly. Every accusation was built on partial truths twisted just enough to seem incriminating. As security escorted me out, I saw Sean settling into my position, literally and figuratively. He'd taken my job, my projects, my reputation. Everything I'd built over 11 years, gone in one Monday morning meeting. But I walked out calm because I knew something he didn't. The victory he thought he'd won was actually a house of cards. And in 30 days, the wind would blow. The first week after my termination was strange. My phone stayed mostly silent, former colleagues sending awkward messages that they couldn't believe what happened, that they hoped I landed on my feet. Nobody really believed Sean's accusations, but nobody was willing to challenge Malcolm's decision either. I spent my days reviewing documentation and making careful preparations. I contacted my lawyer to review the CenturyTech contract structure. Everything checked out. The client relationship was mine, renewable at my sole discretion. Vectra had no legal claim to it beyond the month-to-month subcontracting arrangement I'd agreed to as an employee. I also started working on something else, the foundation of what would eventually become Wintro Consulting LLC. Nothing official yet, just preliminary paperwork and planning. I wanted to be ready when the time came. At night, I'd sit with my wife and explain what was happening. She was furious with Sean, wanted me to sue or expose him publicly. But I counseled patience. The best revenge is letting someone destroy themselves, I told her. Sean doesn't know what he doesn't know. That ignorance will be his downfall. She wasn't entirely convinced, but she trusted me. We'd been married 18 years. She knew I didn't make decisions rashly. Meanwhile, I monitored Vectra from a distance. Former colleagues kept me updated on the chaos that was starting to emerge. Sean was struggling. Projects were falling behind. Clients were confused about who was actually managing their accounts. 3 weeks after my termination, Sean called me. His voice was tight, stressed in a way I'd never heard before. "Hey, Adam. How've you been?" I let the question hang in the air for a moment. "I've been better, Sean. Unemployment isn't exactly my dream situation." "Yeah, listen, about that," he paused, and I could almost hear him calculating what to say next. "I know things ended badly, but I hope there's no hard feelings. It was just a business decision, nothing personal." "Nothing personal," I repeated, letting him hear the irony in my voice. "Right. So, the reason I'm calling, there's this small issue with the CenturyTech contract. Some paperwork thing that Malcolm says needs your signature. I know it's asking a lot, but could you come by the office? Just to wrap up some loose ends." The CenturyTech contract. Of course. The renewal deadline was approaching, and they'd finally realized they couldn't process it without me. "That's weird," I said slowly. "What kind of paperwork?" "Just some technical stuff. Honestly, I don't really understand it. The legal team says we need your authorization for the renewal." "I see." I let him wait, let the silence stretch uncomfortably. "Why would they need my authorization if you've taken over the account?" "Look, I know this is awkward, but can you just help us out? For old time's sake." For old time's sake. The audacity was almost impressive. "I'll think about it, Sean. I'll let you know." I hung up before he could respond, leaving him with uncertainty and no answers. Instead of meeting with Sean or Malcolm, I did something else. I called Patricia Kane at CenturyTech directly. We'd built a strong professional relationship over 3 years, and she'd always appreciated my straightforward approach. "Adam, I've been wondering what happened," she said when she answered. "Your colleague Sean has been managing our account, but frankly, things have been messy. He's all charm but light on actual execution. We've had more issues in the past month than in the previous year." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said honestly. I was let go from Vectra fairly abruptly. But I wanted to reach out because I'm starting my own consulting practice, and I'd like to discuss the possibility of continuing our working relationship, just under a new structure. There was a pause. You're going independent? I am. And since our original contract was actually structured under my personal license anyway, the transition would be fairly seamless. Same service, same level of attention, just without Vectra as the middleman. That's interesting, Patricia said carefully. We'd need to review the legal details, but honestly, Adam, we've been disappointed with the service since you left. Sean doesn't have your institutional knowledge or your attention to detail. If you can provide what you're describing, we'd absolutely be interested in exploring it. I'll send over a formal proposal this week, I said. Thank you for considering it. After we hung up, I sat back in my chair and smiled. The door Sean thought he'd closed was opening again, just somewhere else. Somewhere he'd never see until it was too late. I spent the next few days putting together a comprehensive proposal for CenturyTech. Not just a renewal of existing services, but an enhancement. I outlined improvements I'd wanted to implement for years but couldn't get approved through Vectra's bureaucracy. Custom reporting, dedicated support hours, strategic consulting that went beyond basic project management. I structured everything under Wintro Consulting LLC, which I officially registered that week. The paperwork was straightforward, a simple LLC formation with me as sole proprietor. I set up a business bank account, created a professional website, and established the infrastructure needed to operate independently. Meanwhile, Sean called twice more. Each time, his voice was more strained, more desperate. Malcolm had apparently been pressuring him about the CenturyTech renewal, and Sean was beginning to realize the problem he'd created. Adam, please, we really need you to come in and sign these documents, he said during his third call. Malcolm's getting really concerned about the timeline. I'm sure he is, I replied. The renewal deadline is in 4 days. Right, exactly. So can you come in tomorrow? We'll make it quick, just a signature and you're done. Here's the thing, Sean. I've been reviewing the contract structure, and I'm not sure why Vectra needs me to sign anything. The agreement is under my consulting license, not theirs. A long silence. What do you mean? I mean that technically, CenturyTech is my client, not Vectra's. The contract has always been structured that way. I thought you would have figured that out when you took over the account. That can't be right. Check with legal, I suggested. They'll confirm it. 2 days before the renewal deadline, Malcolm called me personally. His tone was controlled but edged with panic. Adam, we need to meet. This situation with CenturyTech has gotten complicated. Complicated how? I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. Our legal team says the contract is under your personal license and that we can't renew it without your authorization. They're saying you technically own the client relationship, which doesn't make sense given that you were our employee. It makes perfect sense when you look at how the contract was originally structured, I explained patiently. I was an independent contractor with CenturyTech before Vectra hired me. We agreed to maintain that structure for liability reasons. I've been essentially subcontracting my services to Vectra for that specific client. But you were our employee. Everything you did was work for hire. Not the CenturyTech relationship. That existed before my employment and was explicitly excluded from my employment agreement. Check my hiring paperwork. It's all documented. Malcolm was quiet for a moment. What do you want, Adam? Money? A settlement to sign off on the renewal? I don't want anything from Vectra, I said honestly. But I won't be signing the renewal. CenturyTech has decided to work directly with my new consulting practice instead. You're what? I've started Wintro Consulting. CenturyTech will be my first client. They've already agreed to the transition. The silence that followed was profound. Then Malcolm's voice, sharp and angry, you can't do this. This is corporate theft. It's not theft when I own the contract, Malcolm. Your legal team will confirm that. I'm simply declining to renew the subcontracting arrangement with Vectra and continuing the client relationship independently. This is because of what happened with Sean, isn't it? This is revenge. No, I said calmly. This is business. Just like firing me was business, according to Sean. I'm making a business decision that's best for my career. Surely you understand that. The deadline passed without a renewal. CentriTech officially transitioned to Wintro Consulting, taking 60% of Vectra's annual revenue with them. The impact was immediate and catastrophic. Vectra's stock price dropped within hours of the announcement. Employees started panicking, knowing that losing CentriTech meant layoffs were inevitable. Malcolm called an emergency company meeting, trying to reassure everyone that they'd recover, but his words rang hollow. Sean tried calling me multiple times. I let every call go to voicemail. On the fifth attempt, he left a message, "Adam, please, you can't do this. They're going to fire me. Malcolm's blaming me for losing the account. This is destroying my career. Please, call me back. We can work something out." I listened to the message once and deleted it. He destroyed my career without hesitation. Now he was experiencing the same thing, except I'd done it without lies. I just removed the safety net he didn't know he'd been standing on. Former colleagues who'd stayed in touch sent me updates. The board was furious with Malcolm for not understanding the contract structure. They were demanding explanations for how they'd lost their biggest client. Sean had been suspended pending an investigation into his role in my termination and the subsequent fallout. Everything Sean had built on stolen work was collapsing, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. 1 week after CentriTech's transition, I received an email from Malcolm. Professional, carefully worded, clearly reviewed by lawyers before sending. It requested a meeting to discuss potential paths forward and suggested we might find mutually beneficial arrangements. I agreed to meet, but insisted it be at my office, a small professional space I'd rented for Wintro Consulting. Location mattered. I wanted Malcolm coming to my territory, not the reverse. He arrived looking exhausted, older than I remembered. Sean came with him, and the change in Sean was stark. The confidence was gone. He looked desperate, defeated, avoiding my eyes as they entered. "Adam, thank you for meeting with us," Malcolm began, settling into a chair across from my desk. "I think we got off on the wrong foot with this whole situation." "Did we?" I leaned back, keeping my voice neutral. "What I mean is, perhaps there's a way we can all benefit here. You have CentriTech. We have infrastructure and resources you might need. Maybe we can find a partnership arrangement." I looked at him for a long moment, then at Sean, who was staring at his hands. "Why would I partner with Vectra?" "Because we can offer things you can't build alone. Marketing, operational support, established relationships with other clients." "Clients you'd assign to Sean?" I asked, finally looking directly at him. "The man who fabricated evidence to get me fired?" Sean flinched but said nothing. Malcolm shifted uncomfortably. "That situation was unfortunate. Based on new information, we realize mistakes were made in how your termination was handled." "Mistakes," I repeated. "That's one way to describe orchestrated character assassination." "Adam, I'm sorry," Sean said suddenly, his voice cracking slightly. "I know I messed up. I was desperate, and I made terrible choices. But please, don't let your anger at me destroy what Malcolm's trying to salvage here." I looked at Sean, really looked at him, and tried to find any remnant of the person I'd once called my best friend. All I saw was a stranger who'd betrayed me completely. "You stood in that conference room and accused me of fraud," I said quietly. "You used my own work as evidence against me. You destroyed my reputation with lies, and you did it without hesitation because you wanted my position. And now you're asking me to save you from the consequences of those choices?" Sean's face flushed. "I know I hurt you, but..." You didn't just hurt me. You tried to destroy me. The only reason you're here now is because your plan failed. Not because you regret what you did, but because it backfired. Malcolm interrupted. Regardless of what happened between you two, we need to focus on business realities. Vectra is struggling without SentryTech. You have them now, but maintaining that client alone will be challenging. We're suggesting a partnership that benefits everyone. I pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. These are the terms under which I'd consider any business relationship with Vectra. Malcolm opened the folder and his expression changed as he read. The terms were deliberately unreasonable: majority control of any joint venture, complete autonomy over client relationships, and most significantly, Sean's termination from Vectra as a precondition to any discussion. You can't be serious, Malcolm said. Completely serious. Those are my terms. Take them or leave them. This is extortion. No, this is business. Just like firing me was business, remember? Malcolm and Sean left my office without agreeing to anything. I knew they wouldn't. The terms I'd proposed weren't meant to be accepted, they were meant to make clear that I had all the power now, and they had none. Over the next few days, the situation at Vectra deteriorated further. Without SentryTech as revenue, they couldn't make their quarterly projections. The board forced Malcolm to implement immediate layoffs. 20% of the staff was let go, including most of the project management team. Sean was among those terminated. Not because of the terms I'd proposed, but because the board's investigation had uncovered what he'd done. The fabricated evidence against me, the stolen project files, the systematic credit theft. Once they started looking, the pattern was undeniable. I heard through former colleagues that Sean had been escorted out of the building by security, just like I'd been a month earlier. Except this time, there was no applause from the conference room. No one thought he'd saved anything. He'd destroyed it. He sent me one final email: I hope you're satisfied. You've ruined my life. Everything I worked for is gone. I lost my job, my reputation, everything. And for what? Because your ego couldn't handle me being successful? This is on you, Adam. You did this. I read the email twice and felt absolutely nothing. Then I deleted it and went back to work. 3 months later, Wintro Consulting had grown beyond what I'd imagined possible. SentryTech had been so satisfied with the improved service that they'd referred me to 2 other companies. Within weeks, I had 3 major clients and was hiring my first employees. One of those employees was Jenna, my former colleague from Vectra who'd tried to warn me about Sean. She'd been laid off in the downsizing and jumped at the chance to work somewhere that valued loyalty and honesty. I can't believe how fast this has grown, she said one morning, looking around our new expanded office space. A few months ago, you were being fired. Now you're building something bigger than what you left behind. Not bigger yet, I corrected. But getting there. What happened to Vectra? I heard Malcolm resigned. He did. The board wanted someone to blame for the SentryTech disaster. He was the obvious choice. And Sean? I shrugged. I heard he's working at a much smaller firm now. Entry-level position. Apparently, his reputation in the industry took a hit when word got out about what he did. Jenna nodded, satisfied. Good. People like that shouldn't be rewarded. I didn't disagree, but I also didn't dwell on it. Sean's downfall hadn't been my goal, it had just been a natural consequence of his actions catching up with him. I'd simply removed the stolen foundation he'd been standing on. What happened after that was his own doing. 6 months after leaving Vectra, I drove past their headquarters on my way to a client meeting. The building looked the same from the outside, but I knew from former colleagues that inside, it was a different place. Smaller, quieter, struggling to recover from the damage. I felt no satisfaction seeing it. Just a strange sense of closure. That building had been my professional home for 11 years, and I'd poured enormous energy into making Vectra successful. But it had never really been mine. I'd been building someone else's company while thinking I was building my own career. Now I was actually building something of my own. Wintro Consulting wasn't just profitable, it was meaningful. I worked with clients who valued expertise, hired people who deserved opportunities, and made decisions based on ethics rather than politics. My phone rang as I pulled into the client's parking lot. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Adam Wintro? Speaking. This is Patricia Kane from CenturyTech. I'm calling with some exciting news. We're expanding our operation significantly, and we'd like to discuss having your firm handle a major new contract. Are you available for a meeting next week? I smiled. Absolutely. I'll have my assistant coordinate with your team. After we hung up, I sat in my car for a moment, thinking about how far things had come. 6 months ago, I'd been fired and humiliated. Now I was fielding calls about major contracts and building something sustainable. The revenge I'd planned hadn't been about destroying Sean or Vectra. It had been about building something better and letting the contrast speak for itself. A year after everything happened, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Sean, handwritten, 6 pages long. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was rambling, full of justifications and half-apologies. He explained how desperate he'd been, how much pressure he'd felt, how the divorce had left him feeling worthless and willing to do anything to prove himself. He wrote about therapy, about recognizing his mistakes, about understanding now what he'd destroyed. I don't expect forgiveness, he wrote near the end. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did was unforgivable. You gave me an opportunity when no one else would, and I repaid that kindness with betrayal. I destroyed a friendship that meant everything to me because I was too broken to see what really mattered. I'm working on becoming a better person, but I know that doesn't undo the damage I caused. I hope your business continues to thrive. You deserve every bit of success you've built. I'm sorry, Adam. For everything. I read the letter twice, then put it in a drawer. Part of me wanted to respond, to acknowledge his apology or tell him I'd moved on. But another part recognized that responding would reopen a door I'd deliberately closed. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive, not because of lingering anger, but because trust, once shattered completely, can't be rebuilt. I never wrote back. The silence was my answer. My wife asked me about the letter that evening. Do you think he's genuinely sorry? Probably, I admitted. But sorry doesn't erase what happened. And more importantly, I don't need his apology to find peace. I already have it. She nodded, understanding. You've built something good here. Better than what you had before. I have, I agreed. And that's what matters. Today, 2 years after leaving Vectra, I run a successful consulting firm with 12 employees and 7 major clients. We've outgrown our office twice. Last month, we were featured in a Business Journal article about effective independent consulting practices. Sometimes people ask me about what happened with Sean, about how I handled the betrayal. They want to know if I planned the revenge, if I deliberately trapped him, if I felt satisfied watching everything collapse. The truth is more complicated than that. I didn't plan revenge, I just stopped protecting someone who'd been actively working to destroy me. The CenturyTech contract wasn't a trap I set. It was leverage I'd always had but never needed to use until Sean made it necessary. What I did wasn't destruction. It was self-preservation. I removed myself from a toxic situation and took with me only what was legitimately mine. The fact that Vectra couldn't survive without what I'd brought to them wasn't my fault, it was evidence of how much they'd relied on me while refusing to value me properly. Sean's downfall wasn't something I orchestrated. It was the natural result of building a career on stolen work and lies. Eventually, structures built on false foundations collapse. I just stopped being the foundation he was stealing from. I learned something crucial through all of this: helping people is noble and necessary. But there's a difference between helping someone climb and letting them climb on your shoulders while pushing you down. The first is mentorship. The second is exploitation. Sean exploited my friendship, my trust, and my generosity. He took what I freely gave and twisted it into a weapon against me. In doing so, he taught me to recognize the warning signs I'd missed, to protect what I built, and to never confuse loyalty with self-sacrifice. I don't regret helping him initially. I regret not seeing sooner what he was becoming. But even that regret has value. It made me wiser, more cautious, better at recognizing when help is being appreciated versus when it's being exploited. My company's success isn't revenge. It's proof that talent and integrity ultimately matter more than politics and theft. It's evidence that you don't need to destroy others to build something meaningful. You just need to recognize your own value and refuse to let others diminish it. I don't think about Sean often anymore. When I do, it's without anger or satisfaction. Just a quiet acknowledgement that some people come into your life to teach you lessons, even if those lessons are painful. He taught me that not everyone deserves your trust, that friendship doesn't exempt someone from accountability, and that sometimes walking away is the most powerful thing you can do. I helped my best friend get hired at my company. A month later, he got me fired. But I was the one holding the contract everyone needed, and when I took it with me, I didn't just take a client. I took control of my own future. That's not revenge. That's justice. And sometimes, they look exactly the same. I close my laptop and look around my office, at the team I've built, the success we've earned, the future we're creating. This is what matters. Not what I lost, but what I built after losing it. Sean thought he was taking my career. Instead, he freed me to build something better than I ever could have at Vectra. He thought he was winning by pushing me out. Instead, he pushed me toward the life I was meant to have. In the end, the greatest revenge was simply this: I moved on. I built something real. I found success and peace. And him? He's still trying to recover from the consequences of his own choices, still trying to rebuild what he destroyed, still living with the knowledge that he traded everything meaningful for a temporary advantage that collapsed the moment I stopped holding it up. I don't gloat about that. I don't need to. The results speak for themselves. Sometimes the best way to win is simply to stop playing someone else's game and start playing your own. To take what's rightfully yours and build something worthy of it. To let betrayal teach you strength instead of bitterness. That's what I did. And that's why, 2 years later, I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving. The contract Sean thought he'd stolen was never his to take. It was mine, and when I left, I took it with me. Not as revenge, but as recognition of my own worth. And that made all the difference.